Imagine discovering your private property has been transformed overnight into a community parking lot by an overreaching homeowners association. What would you do? While some might shrug and move on, Mark isn't one to back down. With no give up in his vocabulary, he was ready to challenge the HOA in ways they never anticipated. And for this HOA, they had no idea what was coming. Mark Thompson, a 45-year-old businessman, had built his logistics business from the ground up. Located on the outskirts of Austin, Texas, Thompson Logistics specialized in freight and parcel delivery services, catering to both local businesses and national clients. The backbone of his operation was a spacious warehouse situated away from the suburban sprawl, an area he had chosen for its isolation and accessibility. The warehouse was not just a building. It was a testament to Mark's years of hard work and his vision for a streamlined logistics operation. With ample space for his fleet of delivery trucks, designated areas for loading docks, and enough parking for his growing team of employees, the facility was the heart of his business empire. On a clear spring morning, Mark drove his pickup truck towards the warehouse, his mind preoccupied with the day's busy schedule. The business had been booming lately, and he was considering expanding his fleet. As he turned into the warehouse driveway, however, he was met with an unusual sight that stopped him in his tracks. The parking lot, usually lined with neatly parked delivery trucks and employee vehicles, was inexplicably full. Sedans, SUVs, and even a couple of minivans were haphazardly parked in spaces designated for his logistics operation. Confusion quickly turned to annoyance as Mark navigated his truck through the crowded lot, searching for a spot to park. After managing to squeeze his vehicle into a corner, Mark stepped out, his eyes scanning the lot for any indication of why his property was suddenly overrun with unfamiliar cars. There was no local event or public gathering announced that could explain the influx. Frowning, he took out his phone to snap several photos of the scene, evidence he knew might be necessary later. His phone buzzed. It was a call from Barbara, his office manager, who sounded equally baffled and frustrated. "Mark, have you seen the parking lot? It's a mess out here, and some of our drivers are parking on the street. What's going on?" "I wish I knew, Barbara. I'm going to get to the bottom of this," Mark replied, his tone sharp with irritation. Ending the call, he made a beeline for the nearby community center that served the local residential area, a sprawling development managed by the Homeowners Association, HOA. As he approached the center, Mark noted the stark contrast between the chaos at his warehouse and the orderly, serene appearance of the community facilities. The lawns were immaculately trimmed, and the flower beds bloomed with vibrant spring flowers, all maintained by the HOA's diligent care. Inside the community center, Mark's abrupt entrance drew the attention of a few locals enjoying a leisurely morning. He approached the reception, where a young woman greeted him with a practiced smile. "I need to speak with someone responsible for the HOA. There's an issue with unauthorized use of my property as a parking lot," Mark stated, struggling to keep his frustration in check. The receptionist's smile faltered, replaced by a look of concern. "Oh, I see. Let me check if our HOA president, Janet Langston, is available." A few moments later, Mark was sitting across from Janet Langston in a small, neatly decorated office. Janet was a poised woman in her early 50s, with a calm demeanor that seemed unshakable. She listened as Mark explained the situation, her expression one of polite attention. "I'm really sorry to hear about this inconvenience," Janet began once Mark had finished. Her voice was soothing, yet there was a distant, almost rehearsed quality to it. "Parking within the community has become quite a challenge lately. We thought the unused portion of your lot could serve as a temporary overflow parking space." Mark stared at her in disbelief. "You thought?" "Without asking, it's not a public resource, it's my private property." Janet nodded slightly, her expression still composed. "I understand your concerns. We certainly appreciate the logistical issues this might have caused. Let's discuss how we can resolve this amicably." Mark leaned forward, his hands clenched in his lap. "Resolve this amicably? I want all those cars removed by tomorrow morning. If not, I'll be towing each and every one at the owner's expense." Janet's composed facade finally cracked, a hint of sternness creeping into her voice. "Mr. Thompson, while I appreciate your position, I urge you to consider the community's needs. We can certainly encourage our residents to vacate your lot, but immediate towing could escalate things unnecessarily." "Unnecessarily?" Mark echoed, his voice rising. "What's unnecessary is the HOA deciding to use my property without my permission. I'm not asking, Janet, I'm telling. Clear the lot, or I'll clear it for you." The meeting ended on a tense note, with no resolution in sight. As Mark left the center, the morning sun did little to ease the chill of the brewing conflict. He knew this was just the beginning, and as he walked back to his warehouse, his resolve hardened. This wasn't just about parking anymore, it was about standing up for his rights. However, the drama was far from over. Returning to the warehouse, Mark found the parking lot situation had not improved. More cars had trickled in throughout the morning, some sporting stickers from the HOA community, clear signs that the issue was far from a one-off misunderstanding. As he made his way through the lot, his employees greeted him with a mixture of confusion and frustration. Inside, the office was abuzz. Barbara met him at the door, her face a mask of concern. "It's getting worse, Mark. Some of the delivery drivers had to park blocks away. We're going to miss shipment deadlines at this rate," she reported, handing him a clipboard with the day's logistics schedules, now marked with red annotations. Mark's jaw tightened. "Gather everyone in the break room in 15 minutes, I'll address this." He strode to his office, his mind racing with the potential repercussions of the HOA's actions, not just the immediate operational hiccups, but the long-term impact on his business's reputation and efficiency. As the staff assembled, Mark outlined the situation. His tone was calm yet firm, projecting not just his authority, but also his commitment to resolving the issue. "I've already spoken with the HOA president. They've used our lot without permission, assuming it wouldn't disrupt our operations. I've made it clear that the cars need to be gone by tomorrow, or we will tow them." Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. The team was clearly behind him, their nods and murmurs of agreement reinforcing his resolve. After the meeting, Mark contacted a local towing company, explaining the situation and seeking advice on legalities and logistics. The owner, a gruff man named Carl who had dealt with similar situations before, was sympathetic. "You're within your rights, Mark. Just make sure you post clear towing warnings around the lot today. Document everything." Armed with this advice, Mark and Barbara spent the afternoon erecting signs around the perimeter of the parking lot. "No parking, private property, violators will be towed at owner's expense." Each sign was a declaration of his determination to protect his business. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the rows of unauthorized vehicles, Mark took a final walk through the lot, camera in hand. He photographed each car, the newly posted signs, and the overall setup, ensuring that every angle was covered for legal purposes. That night at home, Mark's mind was restless. Despite his exhaustive preparations, he felt uneasy about the confrontation that was sure to come. He knew that towing these cars would not just remove physical obstacles, it would ignite a firestorm with the HOA, and perhaps even within the community. Yet, he reminded himself that capitulating would set a dangerous precedent. His property rights were at stake, and so was his authority as a business owner. The next morning, Mark arrived early, the lot still choked with cars. The sight steeled his resolve. He made a round of calls, to his lawyer, to Carl at the towing company, and to the local police department, to inform them of the potential for disputes once the towing commenced. By 8 a.m., the towing company's trucks rolled in, large and imposing. Mark met Carl at the entrance, shaking his hand firmly. "Ready?" Carl asked, a note of solidarity in his voice. "Let's do this," Mark replied, and they walked together towards the first car to be towed. As the hydraulic lift of the tow truck groaned into action, lifting the first vehicle, an expensive-looking sedan, a crowd began to gather. Word had spread quickly, and soon, a small group of HOA residents, some in bathrobes and slippers, others in work attire, had assembled at the edge of the lot. "What's going on?" one woman demanded, her face a mixture of confusion and anger. Mark, prepared for this, began to explain, but was quickly interrupted by shouts and accusations. "You can't just tow our cars," another resident exclaimed. "We were told we could park here." "I've posted signs, and I gave the HOA notice to clear out the lot," Mark responded, his voice calm but audible over the rising clamor. "This property is not a public parking space. It's essential for my business operations, and your cars are trespassing." As each car was towed away, tensions escalated. Some residents threatened legal action, others pleaded for understanding, explaining their own parking hardships. Mark remained resolute, even as he felt the weight of their stares and the heat of their anger. By noon, half the lot was cleared. As Mark watched the last of the tow trucks pull away, he experienced a mix of relief and foreboding. While the immediate crisis was resolved, the impact of today's actions promised to ripple outward, potentially unsettling the previously peaceful atmosphere of his business. He knew the day's confrontations would not soon be forgotten. What would the consequences be? Well, let's find out. But before we delve deeper into the aftermath of this tense day, Here's a quick reminder. If you're captivated by the unfolding drama and eager for more stories like this one, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support enables us to bring these compelling narratives to life and share them with you. Now, let's return to the consequences of Mark's decisive actions. After the tow trucks had departed, leaving an emptied lot and simmering tension in their wake, Mark stood in the now vacant space, pondering the morning's events. He had stood firm on his property rights, but at what cost? The angry faces and heated exchanges with the HOA residents haunted him, a clear sign that the dispute was far from resolved. Back in his office, the phone rang incessantly. Some calls were from supportive business neighbors who had faced similar issues with the HOA, while others were irate residents threatening everything from boycotts to legal action. Mark took each call with a growing sense of weariness, his responses measured and firm, reiterating his legal rights and the necessity of his actions. By mid-afternoon, a particular call caught his attention. It was from a local news station, interested in covering the story of a small business owner standing up against an overreaching homeowners association. The prospect of media involvement was both daunting and appealing. It offered a platform to share his side of the story, which could sway public opinion and potentially deter further hostility from the HOA. After a moment of contemplation, Mark agreed to an interview scheduled for the following day. Meanwhile, Barbara approached him with a worried look. "Mark, several employees are concerned about backlash. They've seen some nasty comments online and are worried about their cars and personal safety while here," she confessed, handing him printouts of social media posts and forum threads filled with vitriol and accusations against him and the company. Mark sighed, realizing the extent of the fallout. "Set up a meeting first thing tomorrow morning. It's important everyone knows they have my full support, and we'll take measures to ensure their safety." That evening, Mark sat down with his lawyer, Jack Reynolds, to discuss the potential legal implications. Jack was an experienced attorney who had helped navigate the initial legal steps of posting proper signage and executing the tow. "Mark, you've done everything by the book so far," Jack reassured him. "The signs, the notifications, the tow, all legal, but we should prepare for a lawsuit. The HOA is likely to retaliate, and they might persuade some residents to join in." Mark nodded, his resolve firming. "Let's prepare our defense. Gather all communications, the photos of the lot before and after, and statements from our employees about the disruptions caused by the unauthorized parking." The next day, under the bright glare of camera lights, Mark recounted his story to the local news reporter. He explained the situation clearly and calmly, emphasizing his efforts to resolve the matter amicably and his right to protect his property and business. The segment aired later that evening and quickly became a topic of heated discussion in the community. Online, opinions were divided. Some community members expressed sympathy for Mark, criticizing the HOA for its presumptuous use of private property. Others sided with the HOA, painting Mark as an uncompromising businessman who lacked community spirit. The following week, as Mark had anticipated, the HOA filed a lawsuit against him, alleging that he had unlawfully interfered with the community's use of his parking lot, which they claimed had been used historically by residents during parking crunches. The suit demanded restitution for the towed cars and a formal agreement allowing designated HOA use of the lot. Mark and Jack spent hours preparing for the legal battle, reviewing every detail of the case. They reached out to other business owners who had faced similar issues, gathering precedents and building a robust defense based on property rights and prior misuse of the lot. As the court date approached, tension within the community reached a fever pitch. Mark received a mix of support and scorn as he walked through town. At the local cafe, a group of residents confronted him, their words heated. "You're tearing this community apart," one woman exclaimed, her face flushed with anger. "I'm protecting my property," Mark replied, his voice steady despite the growing lump in his throat. "No one has the right to use it without my permission. This isn't just about parking, it's about respecting boundaries and the law." The confrontation left him shaken, but as he returned to his now quiet parking lot, Mark felt a reaffirmation of his purpose. He was not just fighting for his rights, but also for the principle that no entity, not even an HOA, could bully or overstep without consequences. The day of the court hearing arrived, and Mark walked into the courtroom with Jack at his side, ready to defend his actions. The courthouse was bustling as Mark and his lawyer, Jack Reynolds, entered. Today wasn't just about a legal battle over parking rights. It was a litmus test for community values and the limits of Homeowners Association powers. The courtroom quickly filled up, a mix of concerned residents, curious bystanders, and local media looking to capture the story. As proceedings got underway, the HOA's lawyer presented their case with a polished air of confidence. He argued that the community had used Mark's lot for overflow parking for over a decade without issue, and that Mark's sudden enforcement of towing was unreasonable and harmful to the community spirit. Mark listened, his frustration mounting as he heard his actions painted in such a negative light. When it was his turn, Jack stood and methodically dismantled the HOA's arguments. He presented documents and photographs showing the clearly marked private property signs, the letters sent to the HOA warning them of legal actions, and testimonials from Mark's employees about the disruptions caused by the parking overflow. The plaintiff's use of Mr. Thompson's property was never authorized, documented, or legally sanctioned, Jack stated emphatically. Mr. Thompson has every right to protect his property from unauthorized use that directly impacts his business operations. The judge listened intently, occasionally nodding or jotting down notes. The community members in the courtroom murmured among themselves, the tension palpable in the air. Outside the courtroom, the debate raged on. At the local coffee shop, community forums, and even on the streets, residents took sides. Some vilified Mark for his lack of cooperation, while others praised his resolve to stand up to the HOA's overreach. In an effort to sway public opinion and provide a balanced view, Mark organized a town hall meeting. With the permission of the town council, he booked the community center, the very heart of the controversy, for the gathering. The night of the town hall, Mark stood before a divided audience. His heart pounded as he took the podium, his notes in hand. He began by outlining the history of his property, the importance of his business to the local economy, and the disruptions caused by the unauthorized parking. "This isn't just about a parking lot," Mark explained, his voice clear and resonant. "It's about the fundamental rights of property owners. It's about ensuring that no entity, not even an HOA, can infringe upon these rights without consequences." Questions from the audience were pointed and challenging. "What about the needs of the community?" one resident asked. "Where should people park if not there?" Mark responded. "I understand and empathize with the parking challenges. However, the solution isn't to encroach on private property. We need to work together to find alternatives that respect everyone's rights." The meeting lasted over 2 hours, with heated discussions and no clear resolution. But it provided a platform for dialogue and made Mark's stance and reasoning clearer to some who had only heard the HOA's side. In the days leading up to the court's decision, Mark felt the weight of the community's gaze. His daily routines were punctuated by supportive nods from some residents and cold shoulders from others. The local media covered each development extensively, keeping the community tightly tuned to the unfolding drama. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. The courtroom was even more crowded than before, a testament to the case's impact on the community. As the judge took her seat, a hush fell over the room. After summarizing the arguments and evidence, the judge began her ruling. "While the community's needs are significant, they do not override the fundamental rights of property ownership and the lawful protections afforded to such properties," she declared. The judge ruled in favor of Mark, stating that the HOA had overstepped its bounds by assuming it could use private property without explicit permission. Relief washed over Mark as the verdict was read. However, his victory was met with mixed reactions, a microcosm of the community's divide. Some residents applauded the decision, while others shook their heads in disappointment, murmuring about appeals and further actions. As Mark left the courthouse, he felt the victory was bittersweet. He had stood his ground and affirmed his rights, but the community he loved felt more divided than ever. He knew the real work of healing and finding mutual solutions lay ahead, and the work wouldn't be an easy task. The days following the court decision were a mixture of relief and resolve for Mark. While he was pleased with the legal outcome, the community's reaction was more polarized than ever. To address the ongoing tension and start mending fences, Mark decided to take proactive steps towards fostering community dialogue and finding practical solutions to the parking crisis. First, he reached out to the town council to propose a joint task force aimed at addressing the broader parking issues in the area. This initiative would include representatives from the local business community, the HOA, and city planners. The proposal was well received, and planning meetings were scheduled to explore sustainable parking solutions that could accommodate the growing needs of the residential and business communities. Simultaneously, Mark worked on restoring his company's image and strengthening relationships with his employees and customers. He organized a series of open houses at his warehouse for local residents and businesses to tour his operations, understand the importance of the logistics facility, and discuss the impact of the parking overflow on his business. During one of these open houses, Mark unveiled a proposal for a small section of his lot to be developed into additional parking, which could be used by the community during off-peak business hours. This gesture was met with mixed reactions. Some appreciated Mark's effort to compromise and contribute to solving the parking shortage, while others remained skeptical of his motives, viewing it as too little, too late. Meanwhile, at the newly formed parking task force meetings, discussions were often tense. The HOA, still smarting from the legal defeat, was defensive and reluctant to concede any past mistakes. However, as the meetings progressed, the focus gradually shifted from contention to cooperation. The group examined several strategies, including the construction of a multi-story parking garage funded by city grants and private investments, improved public transportation options to reduce car dependency, and incentives for carpooling among residents. Mark found himself at the center of these discussions, advocating for solutions that balanced business interests with community needs. His consistent presence and constructive contributions slowly began to change some residents' perceptions of him. They saw not just a business owner protecting his interests, but also a community member actively engaging in finding solutions. As these efforts were underway, the local media continued to follow the story, now highlighting the collaborative efforts to tackle the parking crisis. The narrative began to shift from conflict to community action, which helped improve the public image of both Mark's business and the HOA. Despite these positive developments, challenges persisted. Some hardline HOA members launched a social media campaign to elect new board members who promised to take a tougher stance against local businesses they viewed as unsympathetic to residents' needs. This potential shift in the HOA's leadership threatened to unravel the progress made in community relations. Recognizing the risk, Mark decided to increase his involvement in community outreach. He attended HOA meetings, speaking directly to residents about his views on community cooperation and the importance of supporting local businesses as pillars of the local economy. He also sponsored community events, from school sports teams to local charity runs, demonstrating his commitment to the community beyond the confines of his business. As the date for the HOA board elections approached, the atmosphere in the community was charged with anticipation. Mark, previously seen as an adversary, was now more widely regarded as a key figure in moving the community forward. On the eve of the election, Mark hosted a community forum at his warehouse, inviting candidates for the HOA board, residents, and local business owners to discuss the future of the community. The event was well attended, and spirited discussions took place, focusing on how the community could continue to grow cohesively. The forum provided a platform for open dialogue and allowed Mark to articulate his vision for a community that works together to overcome challenges. His message resonated with many, and the election results reflected a more moderate stance towards business-community relations, with several of Mark's supporters winning seats on the HOA board. As Mark reflected on the tumultuous events that had unfolded over the past months, he felt a cautious optimism. The legal victory was just the beginning. The real victory would be in building a community where business and residential interests were aligned, fostering an environment of mutual respect and collaboration.